When you start Visual Studio, it will open with this screen. If you've already written programs, you can click on one of these arrows on the left and it will open up a list of programs you've already worked on. For instance, if I click on the older arrow, it's going to list programs that I've worked on before. But let's assume we're going to start a brand new program. In that case, I'll click on the Create a New Project button and start from scratch. Notice you're given a bunch of choices, but let's narrow the list a bit. The first thing we want is to choose C++ as the language. Follow that by choosing Windows as the platform. Finally, we want to make a console application. So notice this choice says our project will be C++ and a console app for Windows. Now you can click Next. Here's the place to name your project. Name it something descriptive of what the program's going to do. This name makes sense because I'm writing a demonstration program to illustrate how to use Visual Studio 2022. By the way, all of this would look the same if you're using the 2019 version of Visual Studio. The location option lets you choose where to save your projects. If you want to create or choose a folder, click the three dots and you can do so. The default location shown here is similar to what you're going to see if you don't make your own location. Very important, make sure the box in the circle is checked. This will put all of the files for this project into one folder. If you leave the box unchecked, you will quickly have a hodgepodge of files that are unrelated to one another. You really don't need that sort of headache. Check the box. When you click the Create button, Visual Studio will create a project for you in the location that you have chosen. Then it will open the source code file so that you can type in your program and make changes to it. Everything you see in green is a comment. You should know from your reading that the compiler ignores anything in a comment. In other words, the compiler knows that there's nothing it needs to translate there. For now, replace the top comment with a comment containing your name. We'll get more specific rules about this later. In a similar fashion, we don't need the comments at the bottom of the source file. You can leave them in there if you want to. While you're getting used to all of this, just remember the bottom comments tell you how to compile and run your program. That is, you press Ctrl F5. Next, on line 5, I'm going to add the statement about which namespace my program will use. Now, I'm not sure what the person who abbreviated standard as STD was thinking, but I sure hope they're okay. For this demonstration, I'll declare 3 integers named N1, N2, and N3, and initialize them with the values you see on line 9. If you're new to programming, please understand that line 9 tells the compiler to do several things. First, create space for 3 integer variables in RAM and name those N1, N2, and N3. And then go ahead and store the values 5, 10, and -75 in those variables, respectively. On lines 11 through 13, I'm printing string literals followed by the contents of 3 variables. Notice that I said contents of the 3 variables. The string literals are enclosed in double quotes, but the variable names are not enclosed in quotes. That tells the compiler to print the contents of the variables rather than just another string literal. For now, I'll go ahead and add the return 0 statement. The next step is going to be to compile and run my program. If I choose Debug from the top menu, I can see that to run the program without debugging, I just press Ctrl F5. That's what the comments at the bottom told me, remember? We'll get into debugging in a few weeks. Now I can choose to run without debugging from the menu, or I can skip the menu altogether and just press Ctrl F5. Either way, the compiler tries to translate my program, then call on Windows to run it. This time, I had no errors, so my program compiled and ran. You can see the output that it created. But suppose I made a mistake in writing my code. Something minor, like leaving off the semicolon at the end of line 11. Look what happens. Visual Studio, like Big Brother, is looking over your shoulder even as you type your code into the program. See the red squiggly on line 12? That means a syntax error has occurred. When I hover the mouse over the red squiggly, it tells me that Visual Studio expected a semicolon by the time I got to line 12. Ah, that means a mistake occurred on or before line 12. And it did. It happened when I left off the semicolon on line 11. If I press Ctrl F5 anyway, I get this message box telling me that the compiler found C++ errors in my code. Then it gives me the option of going ahead. Please make sure you never click the Yes button. If you do, you're not going to like the results. After all, Visual Studio has already told you there's an error. Stop and fix it. When I put the semicolon on line 11, the red squiggly disappears and my program will compile and run again. Just FYI, well, really, I guess this whole video is FYI, isn't it? Anyway, here's the folder on my hard drive where this demo project is located. When I double-click the folder name, I can see the files that Visual Studio created to support my program. There are two very important files to notice. First, there's the project file. It has the extension SLN, an abbreviation for solution. This file contains information that makes sense only to Visual Studio. Leave this one alone. The other one is the source file I just created. Notice it has the CPP extension, meaning C++. If I open it, look what I get. Hey, that's my source code file, the one I just typed into Visual Studio. If you ever need to find your source code, and you will need to find your source code, here's how to do it. Go to the project folder and look for the file with the CPP extension. You can always open it just to make sure it's the right one. And there you have it, the basics of Visual Studio. There's a lot more to learn, but this ought to get you rolling.